Buck, there's about 30%, 25% maybe of the American public, and they are wildly overrepresented on social media and certainly way overrepresented in the blue check brigade on Twitter that are furious at Joe Biden for saying the COVID pandemic is over. I mean, it was just trending last night. Number one trend was COVID is not over, and they were ripping Joe Biden for saying this. Joe Biden hadn't done an actual interview in over 200 days, I believe was the number. An unprecedented amount of days to not sit down and do a one-on-one interview. 60 Minutes, as many of you out there who watch NFL football knows, makes a ton of money and viewership off their show coming on immediately after the NFL ends on CBS many different weekends. And that was the case with the debut episode of their new season, and it featured a long-form interview with President Joe Biden. And Buck, as is often the case, the more Biden talks, the worse it goes for him. His approval ratings went up when he got COVID and when he spent a month on vacation during the summer. Since he's come back and started talking, his numbers have gone down, and now the left wing of his own party is angry at him. There were a lot of news-related comments from Biden because he doesn't talk to the media that much. But let's start with this one. He said the COVID pandemic is over. This was last night on 60 Minutes. I want you to listen.
Mr. President, first Detroit Auto Show in 3 years.
Yeah.
Is the pandemic over?
The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it. But the pandemic is over. If you notice, no one's wearing masks. Everybody seems to be in pretty good shape.
He was wearing masks outside alone.
Yes.
2 weeks ago, Clay.
Yeah.
For 2 years, they've been wearing masks. 2 weeks ago, he was wearing a mask. I saw people this morning on the street in New York City, and I saw more than just that. We'll talk about that later, wearing masks. What changed between now and then? Oh, there's an election come. They're really going to do this right now. They're going to do the whole, we're going to tell everybody everything's great and hope that they're just foolish enough to believe the propaganda. Clay, they fired 850 teachers last week in New York City, where I am right now. Who could justify this? They fired them for not getting the vaccine, everybody. They fired almost 1,000 employees of the city of New York last week because they won't get a shot.
And it's up to nearly 2,000, I think, teachers in New York City alone total.
But they just did
850 more.
I mean, it's firing people a year ago was stupid and unfair. Firing people now is just monstrous and vindictive. I mean, this is completely insane. Why isn't Joe Biden asked about that? Where is Mayor Eric Adams, who is a total catastrophe, by the way, a buffoon, an imbecile? Where is he on this issue?
It's a great question. And what I found most interesting about Biden's comment there, for anyone who has a functional brain and looked at the data, COVID was over by the summer of 2020. Yep. And I know a lot of you out there feel the same way, that you knew what the dangers were, that you knew what you might need to do depending on your individual health concerns. But basically, the data has continued to reflect, if you're under the age of 50, you were never in any sort of danger from COVID at all. You were far more likely, for instance, under 50 to die driving to and from your office than you were to die with COVID. And certainly if you're a kid, the fact that we required kids to wear masks at all. But Buck, what I found most interesting about this was not Joe Biden saying it, because I agree with you. I think it's a ploy to try to look like he's accomplished something as we get ready for the midterms. Because remember, the premise upon which Biden ran was twofold. I'll solve COVID, I'll end COVID, and that, whatever, has not happened really. And he also said, I'll restore normalcy and decency to the White House. That certainly hasn't happened either. But on the COVID front, Buck, there's about 30%, 25% maybe of the American public, and they are wildly overrepresented on social media and certainly way overrepresented in the blue check brigade on Twitter, that are furious at Joe Biden for saying the COVID pandemic is over. I mean, it was just trending last night. Number one trend was COVID is not over, and they were ripping Joe Biden for saying this.
You know what this has really shown us? There's so many different aspects of the COVID Fauciite lockdowner panic mentality. But one part of this that I think now you can see very clearly is that the same people who are addicted to victimization, COVID is victimizing them. Oh my gosh, COVID, I'm always so scared. I have long COVID. I need 4 masks. I'm immunocompromised. Have you ever, by the way, I actually have an immune disorder, which is celiac disease. I've never heard so many people in my life running around, I need everyone to wear masks because I'm immunocompromised. Like, you're 25 years old and you've never said this to anybody before and you're a blue check. And now you're suspiciously somebody who's, what's the vulnerable? The vulnerable people. You know who's vulnerable? People who are old, people who are overweight, people with severe health issues who are old and overweight. Everybody else is pretty much fine, okay? And the fact that we're still walking around listening to people whine about this, it's what you're really seeing. The same people who think it's a horrible catastrophe if everyone doesn't announce their pronouns, are the people who are now saying, oh, the pandemic, I'm so scared of it all the time. Perpetual victimhood. They're addicted to it. And COVID is an opportunity to play the victim for them forever, by the way, forever.
Yeah, I think one of the primary impacts of social media is it fetishized victimhood. Buck, I'm old enough to remember, and you're old enough to remember, even though you're still a very young man.
I old enough to remember, Clay? You got to be careful when you use that construct. I don't know.
When we were kids, I'm betting you were taught the same thing that I was. You never wanted to be a victim. If someone bullied you, you stood up to the bully. And there's that great scene, if you want to sort of use it as an epitomization of this, Christmas Story, when Ralphie confronts the bully, and after getting picked on, finally he just turns on the bully and beats him up. I mean, that's one of the iconic scenes in American
I thought you were going to go with Marty McFly's dad when he knocks out the bully at prom. It's like one of the most inspiring moments of my young life was seeing that guy get laid out on the car.
What would happen now is you would go to your teacher. You would say, oh, somebody's being really mean to you. You would go home. Your mom would sit you down on the couch. They would take a TikTok video. They would put the TikTok video up on social media. It would go viral. And for being a victim, you would be fetishized. There would be a great amount of outpouring of emotional support because of people being mean to you. And look, I wish bullying didn't exist. I wish there weren't bad things in the world. But we have taught an entire generation of kids, and they certainly are coming of age on social media, that being a victim is a point of pride. That if someone is mean to you,
and it gives
you should go straight to social media and talk about it.
It gives you power, by the way. People,
you are powerful.
This is why the COVID lunatics love this. It's, you have to mask. You have to do this because I said so, because I'm at risk.
Yeah. And Buck, I mean, I keep coming back to stories like Jussie Smollett and the the Duke volleyball player at BYU, because this is the natural outgrowth of that. People who aren't even victims now are so in love with the idea of being a victim that they either make it up whole cloth like Jussie Smollett did, or they maybe, best case scenario, if you're being really charitable to this Duke volleyball player, she thought she heard racial slurs when they weren't actually there because she's so conditioned to believe that she's a victim. And then she goes on social media and everybody praises her. And so this, to me, like the COVID, it's a good connection by you. This COVID fear-mongering, the fear porn, as I've called it for a couple of years, these people are not going to let go. And I really wonder, how does the Biden administration, even if it's just for politics that he says COVID is over, how do they manage to convince the 30% or 40% of the Democrat base that will not give this up? How do they convince them to go back to normal?
This is why,
I don't know how they do.
Obviously, today we're going to talk about the Martha's Vineyard migrant
fallout,
debacle,
yeah.
the follow-on to that, and inflation and Biden's inflation answer. We got Charlie Gasparino from Fox joining to talk about that. I mean, we're going to tackle all these issues, border economy, everything else. But why do we keep hammering COVID? We keep telling everybody about this because we have enough people listening in states that are up for grabs that if this audience mobilizes on that issue at the polling place when they're actually voting, there can be some accountability, but also we can stop this. The Biden administration still wants to bring back the federal mask mandate as a tool they can turn on and turn off. For people who think this is all done, to your point about the 30 or 40% of hysteric meltdown libs,
the Democrat base,
COVID,
most left wing out there.
By the way, what's amazing to me too is that they're actually not senior citizens. Senior citizens have a perspective on life they understand. The ones that I see freaking out are aged 25 to 45, particularly.
Yeah.
Those are the
which have zero risk.
Zero risk. So they just love this. They love the attention. They love the power of you have to do this because I say so. They're going to try to downplay this. That's why Biden just said, the pandemic's over. Because first of all, promises made, promises kept with the pandemic is going to be something they try to sell.
Do you think, by the way, this was planned, or do you think he just stepped all over himself and said this?
I think Bidenology, the analysis of Biden is made effectively impossible to do with precision because it's tough to know whether it's mostly he's stupid, which he is, mostly nasty, which he is, mostly lying, or it's a function of his age and dementia. You can never really tell which of those is the primary factor, I think. So to your point about what he's saying in the speech, I don't know, man. I mean, there's plenty of reasons why Joe Biden says crazy stuff that's untrue, that goes off the rails. And I think obviously a lot of people listening would say, well, Buck, I agree. It's all of those things. I'm just saying to put it on one, is it because he's a little bit out of it today? Is he sundowning, or is it because he's in a foul mood because he's a nasty guy? But Clay, they're going to just bring it back to why we have to remind everybody about. They just fired 850 people from New York last week. Some of them, not a lot, but some of them probably listen to this show. Not a lot of teachers in the New York City public school system listeners, but some. They just fired people, and they're going to bring some of this stuff back if they can get away with it. They're going to dial it up a little bit in the wintertime.
As soon as the midterms are over, they will, and we know, because we've been telling you for a couple of years now, the numbers will likely go up for COVID like they do for cold and flu and have for generations in winter. So when everybody goes inside and it's cold outside and you're not spending as much time outdoors, remember when they told everybody to go indoors and not go outside, which is one of the most ridiculous of all the COVID
Can I just
guidance.
jump in one thing? They actually made COVID worse. I want everyone to be very clear on this. More people got COVID early who were at risk because they made up these stupid ideas that people thought protected them.
Don't go outside, stay 6 feet away. Let's every single person go into one house and every single person
don't
go
get
into
sunshine,
one grocery.
Get fatter, have your immune system run down, become depressed. Oh, but social distancing and cloth masks will protect you. Not true.
Yes, all of it was a lie.
Your approval rating in the country is well below 50%. And I wonder why you think that is.
This is a really difficult time. We're at an inflection point in the history of this country. We're going to make decisions, and we're making decisions now, that are going to determine what we're going to look like the next 10 years from now. I think you'd agree that the impact on the psyche of the American people as a consequence of the pandemic is profound. Think of how that has changed everything. People's attitudes about themselves, their families, about the state of the nation, about the state of their communities. And so there's a lot of uncertainty out there, a great deal of uncertainty.
Yeah. It's the psyche of people. It's not that the Biden administration tore the country apart with a moronic, authoritarian, and useless vaccine mandate.
Not only that, his approval ratings have tanked since he started, when people were even more in a time of turmoil.